Yeah, Slocky. All right, back at you again. Shukwaka Rob, Chambers, Virginia. Most way to be edified. First and foremost, want to give our praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushua, Bashim Dash. Second, want to give double honor to our apostles of James Shavuot Fuel, and the peace, blessings, salutations to the whole for elect. It's something I asked ChatGPT about coercing of a society. I'm going to bring forth this chapter of the Epistle of Jeremiah. We understand, Jeremiah prophesied to Israelites, his people, and let me see something. So, all right. It says Jeremiah prophesied extensively to the people of Judah, including those already taken to Babylon in captivity. Like in 59-7 BCE, sending them specific messages via letters. Jeremiah 29, to settle down, build homes, and seek the welfare of their captives, while also prophesying their eventual return after 70 years, promising restoration under Yahweh's covenant. He lived through the destruction of Jerusalem in the beginning of the exile, delivering a message of judgment for sin, but ultimate hope and rebuilding. Letter to the exile. Jeremiah sent a letter telling the exiles in Babylon that their captivity would be long, 70 years, urging them to plant gardens, build houses, and pray for Babylon, as their future was tied to it, promising Yahweh Shai will bring them back. The yoke of Babylon. He famously wore a yoke around his neck to symbolize submission to Babylonian rule, telling Judah and surrounding nations to submit to Nebuchadnezzar. And when you really understand that whole thing, you really understand what this all meant, because prior to, like the Book of Judges, Israel will go off, and then eventually the Lord will rise up a judge, and He will deliver our people. But this go around, our people was going to be in Babylon for a long time, for some generations, and ultimately we had to pretty much make a lifestyle of it. So it was a work and a trying of our faith and pretty much belief. But ultimately we had to get judged. Just like today, we've been in America for a long time. Esau was able to rebirth themselves. They come back into power, not rebirth themselves, but come back into power after the Renaissance era, and with a sure hand in the 1600s, the reestablishing of and conquering of our people, having a sure foot in the 1600s. He brought forth this kingdom that you see today, and we've been here for a long time. And we pretty much had to really, how you say, use wits, use knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Like the scripture said, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding should be the stability, our stability. So certain things we had to, pretty much learn. We had to learn how to move amongst captivity, right? So this is I asked ChatGPT, how did ancient Babylon coerce its citizens, or really indoctrinate their citizens? And even to this day, you have a lot of our people which have pretty much believe in this system. But we understand how the Lord kept a remnant. 7,000 men that should not bow down to Baal. And we're learning. We in this captivity. Yeah, we grew up ignorant. Full of death. In Galatians 5, the 5th chapter. and join unto idols. But through Yahweh Shah, we've been able to wake up and recall ourselves and rethink ourselves. So now we're showing our faith amongst living here in Babylon the Great. Um, and that's how you show your faith. Not Romans 12, 1 and 2. Envying not the ways of the heathen. But I'm going to read this. So ancient Babylonian society, like most early states, it says, they worded it wrong, but it says organized ideological sense. Well, it said it did not practice indoctrination in the modern organized ideological sense. However, it did have powerful mechanisms of socialization and control that shaped how people thought, behaved, and understood their world. The system operated through religion, education, law, and public ritual. And this is what you see today. How Esau has constructed this empire, this infrastructure. It makes it seem astounding and different and liberal. Pretty much, hey, it's Babylon the Great. You know, so one is religion. Number one is religion as the core of socialization, socializations. You look at the main so-called religion here has been what? Christianity, and Catholicism. Religion was primary tool. Religion was the primary tool through which Babylonians understood their place in the universe. And this is why Esau. Again, Esau studied these ancient civilizations. So best believe he knows what he's doing. That's why when you go back to the Jews, the fake Jews, people in that land of Israel now, they got a Babylonian Talmud. They don't go into the Bible. They have a Talmud, a Babylonian Talmud. So it says it reinforced loyalty to the state and obedience to authority. How it functioned: the king was believed to be chosen by the gods, especially Marduk in Babylon. Obeying the king meant obeying the gods. Nothing changed. Myths like the Enuma Elish creation epic were recited publicly during festivals. We all know them Christian, not Christian, well, yeah, certain Christian songs. We all know the Christmas themes. We all know Thanksgiving. We all know what. It's more. A lot of these festivals, a lot of these holidays, they have their own little theme to it. So like the Easter Bunny. During festivals to reaffirm that Babylon and its gods, particularly Marduk, were divinely dominant. So this is why every year you would think, why don't they change certain things up? No need. They want you to have this embedded in you. The American fashion, the customs. This is how people become Americanized. This is why people can come from another country with their own ways, and then they end up here for a long time, or they have children here. Their children have become what? Americanized. Why? Because the rituals, the religion, hey, I'm gonna go back up through religion, education, law, and public ritual. So temples controlled economic life, distributing food, land, and jobs, aligning prosperity with obedience to religious norms. You make your allegiance to Christianity, Catholicism, etc. Or you tap in more deep. You go into these dark societies, omens and divination, reading astrology, created trust in the priestly class seen as interpreters of cosmic order. Um, let me see. This religious framework made social hierarchy appear natural and divinely mandated. So, two, education and scribal training Formal education was limited to scribes and elites, but it created a literate bureaucracy that upheld state ideology. What scribal schools taught: cuneiform writing, laws, law codes, mathematical tables, proverbs, and wisdom texts emphasizing obedience, humility, and respect for authority, traditional stories and hymns that promoted Babylonian cultural identity. And like I said, that's hey, like you said, education and scribal training. This is why when your kid get of age, you gotta put your kids in an educational full system, and they indoctrinate you from what 4 to 18, and then if you want further indoctrination or coercing, you go to college. 3. Law and public justice. Babylonian law was not just a legal system, it was a moral and ideological statement about how society should function. And that's is no different than here in America. Key example: the Code of Hammurabi. Although the code predates Neo-Babylon, its principles remain influential. So laws were described as given by the gods through the king. The prologue frames Hammurabi as a shepherd chosen to maintain justice. Um, it's a legal structure reinforce social hierarchies, different penalties for nobles versus commoners, and normalize inequality as divinely ordained. Um, Public rituals and spectacles. Rituals were a form of collective emotional experience that reinforce identity and loyalty. So let me see. This is an example. A Ketu New Year festival. The king underwent a ritual of humiliation and reaffirmation of divine support. Reenactments of creation myth reinforced Babylon's central place in the cosmos. Processions of statues of the gods showcased state power and religious unity. Temple offerings and communal feasts tied everyday life to the sacred order. So through these events, citizens repeatedly experienced the state's power as natural and sacred. And this is why when you go out throughout the scriptures, I'm going to ask ChatGPT something after this. Architecture and urban space. The physical layout of Babylon was a form of symbolic communication. Monumental buildings like Nanki ziggurat and the Ishtar Gate displayed imperial power. So city planning placed temples at the center of social life, just like you see in America. Esau always shows his dominance and his statues and etc. And then a lot of things go back to the Roman Empire. So it says walls, gates, and inscriptions constantly reminded inhabitants of royal authority. The environment itself communicated political and religious ideology. Economic dependence on temples and palace, control of labor and resources reinforced loyalty. Many citizens worked as temple dependents or palace workers. Man, rations, lands, and housing often flowed from state institutions. Economic survival became linked to participation in state-approved systems. This produced a form of soft indoctrination through economic reliance. Oral tradition and cultural memory. Most Babylonians were illiterate, so stories, proverbs, songs, religious ceremonies all served as vehicles for transmitting cultural values across generations. Just like you got your stories, you got your proverbs, your songs, your religious ceremonies, even like modern day. So let me ask ChatGPT this real quick. And I'm gonna get that epistle of Jeremiah. Let me see, what gods did Israelites worship in ancient Babylon society. Let's see what it said. What it says. During the Babylonian exile, 6th century BCE, the Israelites were taken into captivity after the destruction of Jerusalem. Um, their primary, it's the power. I'm gonna say it right. The primary power, Yahweh. But the historical and biblical record shows that some Israelites did adopt, flirt with, or were pressured toward Babylonian religious practices. Here's a breakdown. So let's see what it says. Um, One, the power of Israelites was supposed to worship um, Yahweh, the power of Israel. Even in exile, the Israelite religious identity centered on monotheistic devotion to Yahweh. Much of the Hebrews Bible exilic literature, Ezekiel, parts Jeremiah, 2nd Isaiah, emphasize the exclusive worship of him. So, two Babylonian gods they encountered. The Babylonians worshipped a large pantheon. Israelites lived among a culture devoted to these gods, and some were tempted to assimilate. The main Babylonian deities included chief god of Babylon, associated with kingship, order, creation. Oh, Marduk, my bad. Bel, my bad. Slaki. Um, so Bel, chief god of Babylon, associated with kingship, order, creation, mentioned in the Bible, Jeremiah 50:51, as a symbol of Babylon's power. Um, Nebo, the god of wisdom and writing, son of Marduk, appears in Isaiah's critique of Babylonian religion, Isaiah 46. Ishtar, Inanna, goddess of love, fertility, and war, powerful and widely worshipped across Mesopotamia. Tammuz, the Muzi, dying and rising vegetation god. The Bible records some Israelites weeping for Tammuz at the temple, even before the exile, Ezekiel 8:14. Um, Let me see. So, three, did Israelites actually worship these gods? So it says some Israelites succumbed to Babylonian religious influences. The book of Ezekiel sharply condemns Israelites for carrying idols even until exile. Some participated in rituals involving astral deities or local Mesopotamian cults. The pressure to integrate into Babylonian society likely encouraged accommodation. So I'm going to read this real quick. Epistle of Jeremiah. Let's see what this says. All right, letter of Jeremiah 1. This is a copy of the letter sent by Jeremiah to the people of Jerusalem just before they were captured by the Babylonian king and taken to Babylon. It contains a message that Yahweh had commanded Jeremiah to give to them. This is I think this is the GNT, if I'm not mistaken. The people face a long captivity. 2, you have sinned against Yahweh. That is why you are about to be taken away as prisoners to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. You will remain there in exile for many years, as long as 7 generations. Then Yahweh will lead you peacefully home from Babylon. There in Babylon, you will see gods made of wood, silver, and gold, gods which people carry on their shoulders and which fill the heathen with fear. You must be careful never to imitate those Gentiles. Don't let their gods fill you with fear when you see them being carried in possession and being worshipped. Instead, say to yourselves, it is you alone, Lord, that we must worship. Yahweh's angel will be there with you. He will take care of you. And this is why ultimately this is very symbolic to what we have to do even to this day. Because we're in Babylon the Great underneath the so-called white man. And the ones that know, we understand this is the so-called white man's kingdom. You can read Job 9:24. Their idols are plated with silver and gold and have tongues that were carved by woodworkers. So this again, now here, in ancient Babylon, you had actual images. Well, today is the indoctrination, the coercion, and the misleading of pretty much the philosophies, the what you would call it. You get what I'm saying. So, continue on. So, but they are not real gods and they cannot speak. The people make gold crowns and put them on the heads of their gods as if these idols were girls who love jewelry. Sometimes the priests steal the silver and gold from their gods and spend it on themselves. They even give some of it to the temple prostitutes. People take these gods of wood, silver, and gold and put up clothes on them as if they were human. But even though the gods are dressed in purple robes like kings, they still cannot keep themselves from being tarnished or protect themselves from termites. When dust from the temple settles on their faces, someone has to wipe it off for them. Like human judges, they hold scepters in their hands, but they have no power to punish anyone who wrongs them. Sometimes they have daggers and axes in their hands, but they cannot protect themselves from being destroyed in war or being carried off by thieves. All of this proves that they are not gods. Do not worship them. Um, I mean, it's so I'm gonna jump down a little. The foolishness for worshiping idols. Verse 40. How can anyone think that they are gods or call them gods? The Babylonians bring dishonor on their own gods. And when you look at these Edomites, starting with Amalek on down, they don't call them. Now here it is. You got Edomites, certain Edomites that call themselves Christians, Catholics, or they believe they worship something. And then you got Amalek, and when you really look at their own, how the way they ordain themselves, and even their own people in this whole infrastructure, you can just tell they dishonor their own thing. When someone cannot speak, they take him to the temple and ask Bel to give him the power of speech, as if Bel could understand anything. But even when the people realize that their gods cannot help, they are stupid enough to go on worshiping them. Not only that, but women wrap cords around themselves and sit alongside the road burning incense and offering themselves as prostitutes. When one of them is taken off for sex, she returns to ridicule the woman next to her who was not beautiful enough to be chosen. Yeah, yeah. Everything about these idols is false. How can anyone think that they are gods or call them gods? Yeah, one thing, yeah, food for thought, one thing shit, man, temple prostitutes. Well, the so-called black woman has become, well, the Israelite woman, no, I'm not going to call them Israelite women. The black, Latina, Hispanic women, which are Israelites, but they're the Edomites women. They're this society's women. They're the modern day temple prostitutes for this infrastructure. So majority of the time, when you get with these women here in America, they're really temple prostitutes trying to seduce you to pretty much as a man to just fold into this system. Yeah, man, woman take ridicule the other one. Yeah, that's what these women do here in America. Woodworkers and goldsmiths make these gods so they can never be anything other than what these people want them to be. Even their makers do not live long lives. So how are they able to create gods? These people leave nothing but deceit and disgrace as an inheritance for future generations. When wars and disturbances come, the priests plan where they can go into hiding with their gods. These idols are helpless in the face of wars and disturbances. Why can't people realize that these idols are not gods? But you can, I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's a long chapter, but the Epistle of Jeremiah or Letter of Jeremiah, you can read. And, it's a great chapter. I think it's one page or two, one or two pages, and it goes in. You can, equate this to what we're going through to this day. But I'm gonna go wrap this thing up. Those who was edified. With them, I say shalom.